Sometimes I do the same thing on the show. We need to have a talk, Chris.
So there is some of that. But one of the things that, I kind of learned from my daughter, because you can learn from your kids, right? One of the things I learned from my daughter was in the recent election. We had a conversation. A lot of kids at her school, again, Zealand, voted for Trump. They basically essentially said, Hillary is a horrible, horrible candidate. You should never vote for her. My daughter came home and said, hey, Dad, why, who are you voting for? And I said, well, who do you think I'm voting for? She's like, well, I know it's not Trump because I've heard you say that name 30,000 times and you don't sound happy about it. Very true, honey. And so the first thing that she talked to me about or told me about it, she goes, well, I want a woman president. Why don't we have a woman president? She goes, it makes zero sense, Dad, why we should have how many men and no women. And I said, oh, that's a fair point, honey. And she goes, so are you going to vote for Hillary? And now this is before the primary. Politically speaking, and again, this is my 9-year-old, but politically speaking, I don't lean towards Hillary's, I lean towards a Bernie. That's politically, that's where I fall in line. But she made a good point to say, hey, there's no women presidents. Don't you think that's sometimes more important, Dad, than us having, another male? And I said, I'll tell you what, honey, let me think about that and I'll get back to you. So later that day, maybe it might have been, it took me a couple of days, but I had to come back to her and say, you know what, I sat down, I did a little bit of research, I thought about that. I said, you make a very valid point for a 9-year-old, honey, maybe you should go into public speaking too. But what it taught me is that the principles I was raised on, the upbringing I had, be skeptical. I was instilling in my children. The difference between how my parents dealt with it and how I dealt with it is, I said, okay, I'm going to listen and learn, and let's talk about that later. And that was a huge thing for me, is to learn how can I instill that in my children as well as continue to instill it myself. So my children are very good reminders of exactly what I need to do and where I've come as a parent.
Well, I don't have any expertise in it. Like I've said this a couple times, I'm just new and starting this game. And so the question that I had to ask myself is basically, what am I going to do? And just a few things that I picked on my own was just my own personal self-education was something that I really thought was important. After finishing college, I realized after not having compulsory education, because it was still self-imposed, but it was still compulsory, I wanted to graduate, that I missed learning every day. And I had a short period where I just really didn't do a whole lot. And then a lot of this self-learning and self-education came through. And so I want to try to instill that early on, because my parents are both working middle class. We worked and they were tired, and so they played with me, but education was like, just do your homework, whatever. And I didn't learn a lot about the importance of, perpetual learning. So that's something that I want to do. But also, I'm reminding myself to become a child again. So I set my embarrassment and my ego at the door, and I get on the floor when I get home. I get down to her level, and I live life from that point. When she shows amazement and interest in something that is benign and simple, I climb right over there and do it too. I am on the floor dealing with life the way she sees it, so I can kind of try to understand where it's at. And that is the whole thing, because there's an advertising campaign that's going on all around the world, mostly in the European, Scandinavian countries. There is a billboard on the side of a bus stop. And if you're looking at it from an adult's perspective, it just shows a child and it says something. But if you look at it from below 40 inches, that child's face has bruises on it. And at the bottom it says, if you need help, call this number. Now, if you think about that, there's two perspectives to look at. So looking at being a parent from way up here, above them, it's different than if you're reminding yourself what it was like when you were there. And so I try to remind myself to go there, to really spend the time down on the floor and make sure that I'm basically bringing her that installation of the basic humanism that I want to bring along. Like, everybody is equally valid and important. And so those are really important things. And then the only other thing that I really know as of now is the old adage to live life as if. So you want to live life as if it's normal for women to have full equality. It's normal for people of same sex or unidentified gender or gender fluidity to get married and choose what they want. Like, those things, if you live as if life is already like that, then maybe you can create that society that you're looking for. And so that's just a start of where I am. That's kind of where I'm going. And I watch some of his stuff that he's dealing with when I see the kids, and there's no other way to deal with this, but just put your helmet on and get along for the ride. But right now it's really easy because she's only 2.5. So I'm learning from him and thinking about my parents and everything. It's really cool just to see that the diversity of life and things that from his experiences to what I'm hoping mine will be.
So one of the things that we had, is as I came out, I talked about earlier a little bit, I was very angry at religion. I pretty much isolated a lot of my family. So for about a year, I stopped getting resources in how to parent. So I had to turn to books. I started doing a lot of reading. I had to do tons and tons of reading. One of the blogs that I came across was from Wendy T. Russell. And this has got to be back in 2013, somewhere in there. She had 6 points about secular parenting, right? And really you could take this and point this at anything, but these were some of the big points that I learned as I started coming out. They have returning to religion for the sake of kids. Well, I did that. Didn't work for me. Don't do that no more. Number 5 was give religion a silent treatment. I did that for so many years. I didn't address it. I let the kids go to church. I let my teens do whatever they wanted in terms of that. And then I would take them during religious holidays and say, yep, you're going to sit here, you're going to be quiet, stand up, pray, do all these different things. But in reality, I was letting the church teach them things that I could probably actually have taught them at home. So when I came out, that was one of the big things I had to learn. Indoctrinating kids against religion. Well, the first year, I will admit that I probably failed a little bit, and they heard me rant and rave on a podcast or on the YouTube channel for many times. I did try and keep my anger as much as I could bottled up and not in front of them, but of course, sometimes heated conversations come. The wife and I do not always agree on the best way for the kids to address religious things at school. She's a lot more of a pacifist than I was, we'll put it that way. The other thing was you can outsource your religious instruction. That wasn't going to work for us. So the last 2, 4 and 6, really struck home. Join alternative religious organizations or non-religious organizations such as Michigan Atheists, the CFI, those are the 2 big ones that I joined, and provide religious, spiritual, and philosophical guidance at home. So how does that work, right? If you aren't religious, you don't talk about religion, if it doesn't come up in your daily conversations, how do you bring that up at home? For us, it became very natural. My kids went to a very religious school, even though it's a public school. That stuff came up all the time. You have absolutely no idea how many times we had to have a conversation about prayer in school. And some of it is, it's not teacher-led. A lot of it was school, student-led. So it was not something that I could go take legal action on and say, hey, you know what? You can't do this, because it was led by a student. It was done during recess or playground time. But it's really hard when your child comes home and asks you, hey, Dad, what's Jesus? Why do we pray? So I had to start going through, hey, by the way, this is what I knew as a kid. Hey, by the way, this is what came up. And I started providing examples, kind of like we do on the show a little bit with the crazy crap Chris says. But I don't go to that extreme a lot of the times. But we do have that, quite a bit. So my beliefs started to evolve. And then that's where Hanna comes in. So Hanna's my sounding board. So if I get angry now, even before we start the show, even sometimes I record without telling them, we'll have that conversation. I'll talk about, we start the show off with a dialogue before we even start recording. We talk about what happens in our lives. He gets to come to me and explain the different things that happen to him. I get to come to him and explain the different things that happen to me. And he goes, hey, Chris, you're overreacting. Hey, Chris, you're overreacting. Chris, it's not really that big of a deal that they said God today. So some of the approaches that, he's helped me with has helped me evolve as a parent to intersect and to create empathy with my children. Whether he feels he's empathetic or not, he has taught me empathy more than you can even imagine. He's taught me how can you relate, how can you get your children to relate, how can you understand where these other people come from, right? These other people may not have another secular or atheist outlet. They may not even know what an atheist is. In my town, I can tell you right now, we put a Hillary Clinton sign up after I had a conversation with my daughter. We put a Hillary Clinton sign up right in our yard. You know how many times people would stop by and they point at it, they go, what's that? And I'll be doing yard work, and I'm in a t-shirt, I'm sweating, because it's the middle of summer, and they're like, why do you have that? It's like, well, let me tell you about Hillary Clinton. I don't care. And they walk away. During the Christmas season, Zeeland is known for for Christmas cards on the lawn. It's a weird tradition. Don't ask me why they do it. And I wish I had a picture of it. I didn't think about that. But they have these cards, and what will happen is they put religious cards out, and it's like a billboard, like that. And they put little lights, and everybody does it usually in the main part of town. My wife and I are still debating this, but this year, my daughter and I drew up a proposal for next year to paint a sign about secular solstice or the winter solstice. That way it's not, hey, we hate your Jesus, but it's, hey, we enjoy Christmas just a little differently than you do. But that was the thing, is how can we inject, and how can we teach our children to inject what they were taught, what their beliefs are, to help normalize atheism as much as we can?
Well, with the empathy thing that he's absorbing through osmosis, as far as I can tell, is that we're basically just trying to create, a warm environment for everyone. We're trying to get past a lot of the stuff where we have difficulties with communications. And so I have friends and family, and he's involved in this as well, is that people just help me, they comfort me when there's difficulties with my hearing and things that I'm learning about. His daughter is, I think she's 7.
I have a 9 and a 7-year-old.
Okay, the 7-year-old, yeah, the 7-year-old is really quiet, and when she talks, it's really high pitched. And my hearing loss is in the upper range; it's in the real high treble areas. And so when she talks to me, it's like a giant mouse is squeaking at me. And I know there's words. I know there's words coming out of her mouth because I've seen her communicate with other humans. I know this works. I know it's English because I catch maybe a word every once in a while. But I cannot fathom how I'm going to deal with this with my daughter's voice when she's around the same age. I just simply miss these things. So my friends and family all can, it's going to be fine. It'll be fine. You guys will create some kind of weird hand signal stuff. I was like, you mean sign language? I never learned that because I didn't think I needed it. But hopefully she won't have quite as high-pitched of a voice as that. But these are things that I never really thought I would have to deal with. And so going back onto the science thing is that my hearing loss is nerve damage, and stem cells and things like that maybe could fix my hearing one day. And so talking about the importance of education and science, and maybe my daughter will be pushed enough, and maybe that's what she'll want to do with her life, is create a new stem cell regeneration nerve technique that can save people who are paralyzed, but it'll also fix her dad's ears. This is a possibility. And so I keep telling her that she's going to be my Nobel laureate daughter, and she just says, okay, Daddy. And then she just, obviously, we it's something that we want to talk about, and that empathetic environment is important, and seeing it through friends and family is going to be really great. And so hopefully along those lines, I'll be able to basically escape this black sheep status I have with being the non-believer in the communities and stuff like that. We can create something warm and inviting so that she won't see it as a strange thing, but also science and everything will get, I guess, equal footing in a lot of our conversations.
So as we wrap up, one of the things is teach and provide your upbringing for a basis to desire to change the world. I grew up religious. I grew up, they wanted me to be a pastor. Here now I want to instill in my children, don't be a pastor, but you can change the world in many different ways. Demonstrate to your children that you're willing to change. Be skeptical with your children and allow them to be skeptical as well. Work towards changing yourself to be a better person. Listen to others who have a different background and share best practices. Teach empathy. The last portion, or I'll just take 2 more minutes if that's okay, Joe. The last section is my daughter, my 9-year-old, the one who talked to me about Hillary, came to me when we first moved there. She met a neighbor. A little girl, her own age, goes to the Christian school. And the little girl goes, hey, would you like to go to Jen's with me? Well, I know what Jen's is in some aspects. I know it's this extremely religious crap that I try to avoid my children going to. I didn't want my children to be indoctrinated. But she went there. She wanted to go. Really bad. Really, really bad. So I went and I talked to her the lady's parents. And I went and had a conversation with them about what goes on there. I said, the 3 things that I can't stand is you cannot teach against race, you cannot teach against evolution, and I cannot stand hell. So if you want to teach about love and Jesus' love, I'll be okay, I guess, with that happening, right? So we made a pact. I let her go ahead and go. First time she gets home, I'm nervous. I'm sweating bullets. I go up to her room, she's getting changed, and I'm like, all right, honey, can you tell me everything that happened? She's like, oh, okay, I don't remember. I had fun with Ava. I'm like, what? Like, you don't remember what happened? No, I don't remember. Okay, have a good night. Second week, same thing happened. Third week. Now I'm coming to Chris and I'm going, hey, was I being irrational? And he's like, yeah, a little bit. He says, one of the things he said to me is, he says, think about it this way. What other opportunity is that little girl going to have to interact with an atheist or somebody that was raised as an atheist? What other opportunity is she going to have? She goes to a Christian school. She goes to church 3 times a week. Think about your upbringing, Chris. If you had somebody that had non-religion in your life as a kid, would you have been as passionate about religion? Would you have been a little bit more well-rounded? Yeah, that's a fair point, Chris. That's a very, very, very fair point. So, letting my daughter go to that religious school, or whatever they want to call it, Wednesday night school, actually benefited us, and still, to this day, a year later, all she brings home is, I had fun with Ava, I love Ava, and I want to hang out with her more often.
That's pretty cool. So I just wanted to end with one of the quotations that I like to do is basically a part of that immune system that I always mention. It says, beware the irrational, however seductive. Shun the transcendent and all who invite you to subordinate or annihilate yourself. Distrust compassion. Prefer dignity for yourself and others. Don't be afraid to be thought arrogant or selfish. Picture all experts as they were mammals. Never be a spectator of unfairness or stupidity. Seek out argument and disputation for their own sake. The grave will supply plenty of time for silence. Suspect your own motives and all excuses. Do not live for any others more than you would expect others to live for you. And that's Christopher Hitchens.
Thank you. That's our time. We're Cellar Door Skeptics. We'll check us out at the table later. Make sure you stick around for all the other amazing speakers we have tonight. Thank you.
We have just a couple minutes for Q&A.
I'm just curious, what you said earlier, that you listened to a podcast when you got done.
Which one?
Which one? All right. So the initial podcast that I started with was Seth Andrews, A Thinking Atheist. In fairness, that was literally the very first secular podcast that I'd actually ever listened to. Then there was also Recovering from Religion had ones that they had just started, and that was the second set ones that I actually started listening to right after that.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you. I really enjoyed listening to both of you. I was just curious. You mentioned that you have 2 teenagers, and then you have a 9 and a 7-year-old, and then you had a wife, and then you were divorced. And so your 2 oldest, I assume it's them.
Yes.
Yeah. So you had them with your ex-wife at a time.
So the son on the gentleman on the left is the one I had with my ex-wife. My current wife, that's her son from her previous marriage.
Oh, okay.
So that's why they look different, but they're very close in age. They're within 8 months of each other.
I thought maybe they were twins. I just
Oh.
my question. I was just wondering. So your ex-wife, was she religious? I assume that you had your oldest with her when you were still religious. And how does that? I mean, how does he deal with the difference when he's spending time with her
Versus me.
Yeah.
So on her side, she's actually irreligious. She's apathetic. She doesn't care. She grew up religious as well, but kind of more like Hanna did. I don't know where he went, but kind of like that guy right there. They went to church once a week. Her mom goes to church still. Her mom's active but she goes to a Methodist church, and it's a very open Methodist church that has a LGBTQ minister, or I don't know what they call him, but I believe it's a minister there. And so they're a very open church. So when I transitioned out, he was actually more upset. I didn't want him to go to church because he saw church as, hey, we love everybody and we want to serve the community. And he didn't understand any of the stuff that I had, because the only church that, he had been to was the one with his grandmother. His mom could care less. She doesn't like that. At first, she did not like that I was an outspoken atheist because I caused problems in school, and she hated that. So today, she wanted me to take him here for whatever reason, and he goes, I don't want to listen to you speak about me, Dad. But she was encouraging him now to go to different events. The CFI events are the more main ones that we have on the west side. But she encourages him now to go meet other kids. All she cares about is that he has friends. That's all she cares.
No, that's really good. And we had our daughter here for a short time, but she comes. She's in 3rd grade. And she's coming home now talking about how kids are picking on her, excluding her because she tells me she doesn't believe in God. It's been a struggle. Just kind of neat to hear that, and and so it's going to be a fun, challenging journey.
It is. Lots of alcohol helps, I'll tell you that.
Oh yeah, trust me.
And if you don't drink tea, I'll tell you what tea does wonders too.
Yeah, I was wondering what you would recommend for teaching children about humanistic and scientific topics on a level that they can understand and appreciate. This idea of moral education. That concept of understanding how to be a good human being, not a religious being, but a human being that treats others fairly and with equality?
Some of the books that we have at home are there's a Tiny Thinker series, and I'll be honest, I've never read them, but my kids read them all the time. So my kids read the Tiny Thinker series, and that's one of the big ones Dale has a couple of books. I'm sure Dale will speak about it later. My wife and I have read through Dale's books too, and that's kind of been one of the things that we've used some of the instruction that he brings in his books to talk with our kids about things as well. As for the science side of things, we literally, honestly, I just take and we go, my sister's a teacher, so my sister will literally tell me, hey, Chris, this is the book your kids need. And I didn't really get into my sister. She's technically a Christian, but she's kind of an absentee Christian, and she's a liberal, she supports all of the other causes. So she brings me books, ironically enough, that she teaches in her classes. And I could ask her if you wanted and get you a list of things, but she brings me books and says, here, this is what you should read to your kids. On the moral side of things, we don't have one specifically. We typically, I will pick different things that I read, different moralistic, I am into philosophy a little bit, so I'll take some of those and then we'll talk through them at the dinner table. So I usually try and take 10 minutes inside a conversation at dinner to talk about, hey, what happened today? And then what we do is we take each little point of something that happened, and we use it as a way to direct them or guide them. So, for example, my son comes home and says, I hated school today. Well, why did you hate school? Well, what's the point of hating school? What happened at school today? Well, I got picked on because, somebody knows that I can't sing as good as they did. And then we will talk through some of those different things. And so that's kind of how we do things. But for the younger kids, the Tiny Thinkers is one of the big series that we were in. Another kind of resource that we like to look to is if there's anytime you're talking is we try and infiltrate other groups, right? Other parenting groups, and we find out what other parents are reading to their kids. I recommend definitely looking into anything written by a minority perspective. For example, I can't remember her last name, but she wrote a children's book about a boy that wants to wear a dress to school because he loves the color orange. We like those type of books, and so we typically, those are what my sister will bring, and we try and bring those out, and we donate, when we're done, we donate them to the libraries. So
it was somebody in the tangerine dress was the name of the book that we had a woman interview on. I only give two things when it comes to both of that, and they cover both the moral and the scientific. And start with Mr. Rogers. If they're young enough, really, if you talk about what he says, he has educational things in there, but one of my favorite episodes he ever did was we had a boy with a cerebral palsy, and he was in a chair, and he asked him, what makes you happy? What makes you sad? What are the things in your experiences? And let this kid talk on TV. And when Mr. Rogers was given, I believe he was given some major awards for all of his contributions, that boy came on stage and gave a presentation and thanking him and how important it was to have that moment in his life. And so Mr. Rogers for really young kids and middle school to high school, Carl Sagan, work on any of them. You can find your moral arguments and your scientific stuff, but it's done in such a way that it's understandable to someone who is still a rudimentary scientific education and moderately scientifically literate. And it could be a way to push their intellect. So maybe they understand that Earth in the solar system, but maybe they don't understand that Earth is a tiny little blue dot. Those kinds of things, you can push that a little bit. And then once you get into college and beyond, then you start reading my favorite. You can read the shorter versions of a briefer history in time, Stephen Hawking, and theory, I believe is Theory of Everything, and Grand Design were two of his books that talk about the history of science. Not so much specifically what's in it, but little bits of the really important parts. Who did what and what discoveries were made.
Thank you. They mentioned Arlene Marie a ton of times. Who does not know who Arlene is? Okay. She was our last director, and she was there for many, many, many years. And she got a lot of people started in a lot of different secular groups. So they were, felt really...
She was all over the place.
Yeah, she passed away a couple years ago.
She actually started the Michigan
Yes.
Atheists group in the 70s, I think it was.
Yes.